The Chronicles of Uzaya, a novel by Robert Ray. This audiobook is narrated by Silas Grim, an AI voice built from scratch. No human voice was used in the recording of this audio. Chapter 25. The Judgment. Part 1. The Notice. The drowned quarter woke under low, colorless skies. The smell of sewage and rot hung in the air. It had rained all night. The low district was flooded yet again. The street lay ankle-deep in places, reflecting nothing. A fish merchant cursed as he cleared his stall, lifting trays onto two soot-stained bricks that never left the stoop. An old woman sat outside her door, skirt gathered in her lap, waiting for the water to recede enough to cross. No one spoke much. The usual morning banter was gone. Most stayed inside. Those who didn't kept their heads down, hands busy, as if finishing quickly mattered. A sound moved through the district. A low, wet slurping that went on too long, then stopped all at once. The ground shuddered. Those few who had ventured out into the flooded streets stopped what they were doing. Someone swore under their breath. No one asked what it was. At the fishmonger's stall, two women spoke in low voices. "Did you hear? Jansen's place went down last night. Ground just gave way. Whole family." "I heard. They're saying it wasn't natural." "You think it's the Mist Walker?" the first said quietly. "He was here yesterday, walking through like he belonged." "What do you think happened to Abe?" Neither of them finished the thought. They didn't need to. Not far from Abe's shop in the upper quarter, a city guard nailed a notice to a message board as a small crowd began to gather. Someone stepped closer to it and read it aloud for the others. By order of the Elder Council, information sought regarding Uzaya, half-breed resident of the drowned quarter. 50 gold for information. 100 if detained and brought to the city guard. The crowd shifted, impressed with the reward. "I've seen him," someone said. "Then say something," another muttered. The guard was already gone by the time the murmurs died down. The notice stayed where it was, but it no longer mattered. People drifted off in different directions, taking the words with them. By afternoon, the city was talking. They came forward with stories, eager for coin. Rumors grew teeth. People who had never spoken to Uzaya suddenly knew where he lived, where he hid, what he planned to do. Most of it was lies, but some of it was true. Part 2. The Quagmire. The Quagmire frontier had been expanding steadily for years. But in the days since the tremor, the advance had accelerated. Ground that had been solid for generations gave way underfoot. What was farmland last season was bog now, fetid water pooling where crops had grown. In the evacuated villages, the air was thick with the scent of rot. The roads had already disappeared beneath pools of brackish water. Vines crept up door frames and window shutters, and pale fungus filmed the lower walls. The Quagmire had claimed these places for its own. Beyond the gates of Valros, miles from the city walls, the guard had established a perimeter along the abandoned farm roads where the northern fields gave way to marsh. Empty cottages stood open to the wind. Fences sagged. Round-the-clock patrols kept watch on the mist rolling in from the Quagmire. Humanoid forms walked with the echo of remembered motion. The dead, reanimated by spiral corruption bleeding up from the Quagmire's depths. Other things moved as well. Things that didn't hold a shape long enough to describe. A patrol of 4 guards stood at the northern checkpoint. One of them held a flask he shouldn't have been carrying. Another hadn't shaved in days. "Movement, 50 yards, the patrol leader said. The others turned. Shapes emerged from the fog. How many? 8. No, 10. No. More kept coming. 12. 15. 20. They were closing the distance. "Pull back," one guard whispered. There weren't nearly enough of them to face what was coming. They fell back, slowly, eyes fixed on the dead as they moved. The corpses advanced without haste, breath rasping through torn throats. They did not leave the fog. They kept to its edge, drifting with it as it rolled across the fields. A restless chatter moved within it. The dry rasp of insects rising and falling in uneven waves, wings ticking against reeds, small bodies skittering through wet grass. Shapes pressed against the mist and withdrew. Other things kept pace, shrouded just beyond sight. The figures did not advance. They gathered. More shapes took form behind them, a sallow fog drifting in their wake. By the time the patrol reached the gates to report, more than 100 stood at the edge of the Quagmire's new front, waiting. From Sarek's watchlog, Gates of Valros, Day 47. Noting changes in behavior. One of them stood at the edge of the zone for 6 hours today. Used to be Millbrook Garrison. I recognized his uniform. They buried him in it after the fever took him last winter. Didn't sway like the others, didn't shamble. Just stood there watching us, watch him. Something bigger is moving beyond the tree line, but I can't get a clear look. Dark against the fog. It paced the perimeter. Once. Jaren says I'm imagining it. 47 days staring at corpses will do that, he says. I hope he's right. As Uzaya crossed the mudflats toward Liesenhold, 4 solemn figures were already advancing through the flooded streets toward Abe's Curiosities. Black armor, layered and segmented. Reinforced leather over padded cloth, plates fitted close to the body. Their edges were trimmed in deep purple that caught the light like oil on water. The armor was battle-scarred, dented, scraped, scorched. Repaired, not replaced. Each wore a helm of blackened steel, featureless except for narrow slits to see. No mouths, no faces, nothing pretending to be human. At their chests, a purple insignia set directly into the plate. A simple key, broad-headed and blunt-toothed. The symbol was unmistakable. The Ordained. Drawn from the Unbroken. Bound by oath to the Church of the Celestial Heart. Sent only when fate had already decided. They carried no single discipline. Not warrior, not priest, not mage. Each discipline folded together, hardened by violence. Steel, spell, and sacrament made one. They walked with purpose, boots sinking into soaked earth without hesitation. The streets did not slow them. They moved as if the city had already yielded. People watched from doorways, shutters closed. The road opened ahead of them without a word spoken. No one tried to stop them. The Ordained were not sent to question. They were sent when the realm required it. The figure at the fore stopped at the door at Abe's Curiosities. Taller than the rest, broader through the shoulders, the leader stood utterly still. He was a fixed point the others oriented themselves around tactically without thinking. Each part of the same body. Warden Thorn tested the door. Locked. He nodded to Osric, the shortest of the cadre at a mere 6 feet, broad-shouldered, carrying a maul. One strike, the door splintered. They entered. Cold hearth, empty counter. The plate sat on the table where Abe had left it, geometric patterns shifting subtly. Warden Thorn paused. Ancient construction. Artifact. Take it. He pointed toward the lattice piece. As Brother Kale wrapped the plate in cloth and placed it in his satchel, the others were already searching. One went up the narrow stairs to the second floor. Another checked the back room. They worked through the shop with practiced precision, leaving nothing untouched. Thorne returned his attention to the counter. Empty. He stepped back outside. A crowd had gathered at the corners. His gaze passed over them and did not linger. The half-drow was still at large, but they had found something the elders would want to see. "Back to the crucible," he commanded. The crowd drew back as they passed. The street emptied behind them. Chapter 26. The Hunted. Uzaya moved through the quarter like a ghost, keeping to the alleys and back streets, less known paths he discovered over time. The least visible routes through the busy thoroughfares were already second nature to him. Now, it paid off. He couldn't hide in the quarter. Too many eyes. Too many people who'd sell him out for a coin. But where? The thought came suddenly. Vandrian's tower. The mage had bought the stone he'd found days ago. Vandrian would understand if he was being hunted, might even offer his help. A room in the tower, remote, warded, protected. The idea brought a small measure of ease. He traveled slowly, keeping to the shadows, waiting for the crowds to thin before moving through. Morning turned to afternoon. By dusk, he had reached the road leading to the Silver Spire. The Silver Spire stood seamless, drawn into form rather than built, pulled upward from the cliff itself. No joints broke the surface, no tool marks. Smooth planes and subtle curves defined it. As he crossed the cliffside stair, the damage was impossible to miss. A massive hole gaped in the second floor, the wall torn away and lying in shattered pieces below. Above it, the ceiling had collapsed inward, leaving the room open to the air. A crude wooden barricade had been erected across the entrance, heavy planks braced in a rough frame and anchored into the surrounding stone with iron brackets. An official notice had been nailed to the wood. By order of the Crucible. Entry forbidden. The door itself was intact. Above it, the second floor was a ruin. Uzaya stared. A sinking certainty settled in him. Vandrian was gone. The spire was not. The barricaded door did not budge, but the open wall in the second floor offered another way in. Uzaya circled below the damage, retrieved the hook from his pack, and cast it upward. It caught on the first try, wedged between the exposed floor edge and a broken section of the outer wall. He tested the line. It held. He climbed the rope, boots braced against the seamless stone as he worked himself upward. Sheer effort drove him higher until his hand closed over the edge. He hauled his weight up and rolled into what remained of the bedroom. The bed lay crushed beneath stone and timber. Thick strands of something clung to the frame and trailed up the wall, dried and translucent, rope thick. Webbing? No blood. He moved through the tower with care, room by room, floor by floor. Downstairs, Vandrian's artifact vault had been torn apart. Display cases lay shattered. The containment markings had been scraped away. Whatever Vandrian had collected was gone. The tower was empty. Uzaya found a room on the second floor, opposite the ruined bedroom. A study. Shelves lined the walls. A desk and leather chair worn smooth at the arms. A window faced the spire's approach and the sea beyond. He took out his pipe, and a pinch of pipe leaf, packed the bowl, lit it. The ritual was comforting. Smoke drifted toward the open window as he settled into the chair. He let himself relax, just a little. The sun was quickly setting. Evening settled over Eldenport. Fog rolled in from the coast, as it always did, softening the edges of sound. Uzaya stood at the study window. Beyond the forecourt, the stone fell sharply to the rocks and water below. Waves struck the cliff face, casting foam into the air. Far to the east, Gate Isle stood across the water, dim but unmistakable. To his right, a grand view of the Drowned Quarter curved inward along the shore. Windows glimmered. Thin strands of smoke rose from chimneys and cook fires, drifting and dissolving into the air. Life continued, as it does. The fog thickened outside the spire. Wind whistled past the window. Smoke from his pipe drifted toward the opening, thinning as it curled along the glass before vanishing into the night. When he was finished, Uzaya tamped the pipe, slipped it back into his cloak, and closed his eyes. The room settled. His breathing slowed, the tension easing from his shoulders as the edge of sleep began to take him. He heard it. Schluck, schluck, schluck. Uzaya's gut tightened. He scanned the grounds, the cliff stairs below. At the edge of his vision, a shadow moved in the darkness. Something huge. He leaned into the window, peering into the fog. A shape formed. Too tall, moving with an inhuman rhythm. Then another, and another behind it. The wind parted the fog for a heartbeat. 10 feet tall at least. Green-black skin, slick with slime. Thick tentacles slid across the cobblestones, hauling the swollen body forward with slow, deliberate purpose. Each movement came with that sound again. Schluck. What should have been a face was consumed by a single rounded eye. A thin green beam flickered from its center, sweeping the ground as it advanced. Uzaya pulled back from the window, heart hammering. A sentinel. He looked out again. They were nearly to the door. One of them stopped. The beam lifted, climbed the wall, reached the window. It lingered there. It knew he was here. Uzaya moved fast. Out of the study, down the corridor, toward Vandrian's bedroom. Below him, the barricade splintered. Something struck the stone door. Not once, repeatedly. The impact traveled through the spire. A dull force felt through the floorboards as the door shuddered in its frame. Then the stone gave. A grinding report echoed up the stairwell as the door tore free and fell inward, smashing into the front room below. The wet sounds changed, no longer muffled, slapping against stone, dragging upward through the stairwell and halls. The ruined bedroom was just ahead. He reached it and looked out through the gaping breach in the wall. 20 feet down, maybe more. Movement below. Uzaya turned. A sentinel was slithering up the stairs, its mass rearranging to the shape of the incline as it rose. The eye fixed on him. Tentacles reached forward. Uzaya spoke a word, backwards, the syllables folding in on themselves. His left hand closed, then opened, palm up. Fingers spread. Kethzara Vow. Darkness snapped into being around it. A globe of black liquid held in the air, the consistency of slime or ooze, smooth and cohesive, sagging against its own weight without falling. It enveloped the sentinel, struggling within as the dark conformed around it, flowing around its mass. Tentacles pressed forward, pushing against the surface. Thick bulges stretched outward, then slid back into place, leaving the globe unchanged. A wet, muffled sound leaked through, strained and wrong. Inside, the air would be thick, each breath hard-fought. The sentinel slowed, caught up in the tar-like substance. Uzaya didn't wait to see what happened. He ran to the breach and jumped. He hit the ground and felt something tear in his shoulder. For a moment he lay there gasping, teeth clenched in pain, his arm refusing to answer. He forced himself up. The front area lay open before him. Broken stone, scattered debris, nowhere to hide. The cliff stairs waited beyond. He glanced toward the front door. A sentinel was pressing its bulk back out through the shattered doorway, its body reshaping to the breach, tentacles dragging through debris as the eye fixed on him. The horror in the stairwell had passed through and now loomed at the jagged opening above. As it steadied itself, Uzaya saw the eye begin to glow. He was moving before the light fully formed. He crossed the open ground at a sprint, his injured shoulder flaring with every stride and dragging his balance offline. Behind him, the sound kept coming. Shluk, shluk, shluk. He hit the cliff stairs going much too fast as the path fell away beneath his boots. There was only one place left he could go. The Crucible. Uzaya ran through fog-cloaked streets, taking the steep servants' stairs that cut through Merchant's Rise, a route he'd mapped months ago for exactly this kind of flight. The wet adhesion of the tentacles echoed behind him, hidden in the fog. One street over, right around the corner. The sound cut through everything. The stairs burned through his legs, but his veil-guard blood carried him upward through the pain. The sentinels followed, just out of sight. When the Crucible finally emerged through the mist, Uzaya spied the guards standing watch. As he closed the distance, his legs grew heavier, each step more difficult. A faint subsonic drone became apparent. The Crucible wards were in effect. 50 feet. 30. Uzaya risked a glance back. He saw one of the sentinels looming in the middle of the street, several blocks back along his path. Its form was nearly lost in the fog. Then his blood went cold. Something pricked at his mind. Uzaya snapped his gaze back and ran toward the guards. "Hey!" Uzaya shouted, waving his arm. Even at a distance, his skin gave him away. Weapons came up at once. "That's him," one of them said. "The half-drow." Uzaya didn't slow. They stepped into his path and grabbed him, hands closing hard around his arms. "I'm turning myself in," Uzaya said, absorbing a stiff blow from one of them. The guard who struck him looked him over, then grinned. Another laughed. "I'll take that bounty." They tightened their grip. Uzaya turned his head to look back the way he'd come. They were gone. The guards took him in through the Crucible vault's side gates, past walls that had never known daylight. "The elders will want to question this one personally," the captain said. "Lock him up. We'll send word." They led Uzaya down a long hall of polished stone. Voices and footsteps carried in clipped echoes as guards moved about their business, passing by without comment. At the far end, stairs descended. They took him down into the lower level, where the air turned cold. The steady glow of magic light gave way to hooded lanterns, then to wall-mounted torches guttering against rough stone. At the end of the passage, the cells waited on either side. Plain, iron-barred, worn by generations of use. They shoved Uzaya inside one of them and slammed the door. The lock closed with a loud clunk. Footsteps faded up the stairs. Silence followed. The cell was small. walls close enough to touch with both hands, ceiling brushing hair. The bare floor bled warmth from his feet. A single wooden bench was bolted along one side. The place carried the weight of those who had been here before him, waiting, afraid, drained. Uzaya sat on the bench. Water flask, a few coins, even his dagger, all taken. Null tone. The guard who had grabbed it flinched as if burned, the cold biting through his grip. "Wrap it," the captain said at once. "No bare hands." The blade vanished into cloth and iron, carried off without ceremony. The pendant still hung at Uzaya's neck. The guards didn't notice it, or didn't care. Small blessings. Uzaya sat in the dark. Hours passed. Eventually, footsteps approached. Multiple people, torchlight growing brighter. The cell door opened. Guards, 4 of them, and someone else standing at their center. Elder Castle. Sharp eyes, authority radiated from him. "Come with me." The guards hauled Uzaya to his feet and led him from the cell, up the stairs and along faceless corridors that curved and widened as they went. The passage opened at last into a large circular chamber where the Elder Council met. But no other elders were present. Uzaya was seated at the center, hands bound behind him. Guards lined the walls, with 2 posted at the doors, watchful and silent. Castle was studying him. "Uzaya," he said finally. "Half-drow, resident of the Drowned Quarter. Present at every major incident I'm aware of. Associated with recent missing persons. In possession of forbidden Veilguard artifacts." The lattice scale rested on the table between them. Castle reached toward the scale. His hand slowed as it neared the surface, stopping short of contact. The patterns shifted. Not moving exactly, adjusting. The geometry reconfigured where his shadow crossed it, lines slipping into new alignments that had not been there a moment before. He withdrew his hand. His expression remained composed, but the pause lingered a fraction longer than necessary. Then his gaze lifted to Uzaya's chest, where the pendant hung. Castle did not step closer. He looked at Uzaya. "Explain." "I came to Eldenport to see what's happening here," Uzaya said. Castle's gaze stayed on the lattice piece. "To see what's happening," he said. "Back collecting forbidden artifacts?" "They were Abe's, a scavenger. The one who is now missing," Castle cut in. "He went to Liesenhold," Uzaya said. "I found him petrified." Castle's expression didn't change. "The Medusa," he said flatly, "in Liesenhold." The way he said it made the claim sound impossible. Uzaya held his gaze. "People die there, believing it isn't." Castle's eyes narrowed a fraction. "You expect me to accept that?" he said. "You were caught concealing illegal Veilguard relics." Uzaya didn't argue. "The relics weren't hidden," he said. "They were where they belonged." Castle raised his hand. "What I hear," he continued, "is a half-breed with illegal relics, suspected of murder, followed by chaos and disaster everywhere he goes." Castle's eyes met Uzaya's. "You are the constant." He stood. The guards jerked to attention. "Given the severity of the accusations and the evidence," Cassell said, "the sentence will be carried out swiftly." He turned to leave. Uzaya lifted his head. "What sentence?" Castle paused. "Not long enough to reconsider. Just long enough to be precise. The kind that prevents further risk," he said without turning. He flicked his hand toward the guards. "Take him." The guards closed in, hands clamping hard around Uzaya's arms. He let them. The pendant remained against his chest. They hadn't taken it, couldn't take it, or wouldn't. That meant something. Constant watch, Castle instructed, then added, the dampening cells. They dragged him through the corridors, down the stairs, to the prison cells, and kept going. Deeper still into older stone, through passages half ruined and never fully reclaimed, to a row of cells that hummed faintly with blackstone. This was not part of the prison proper. No ledgers marked what happened here. They shoved him inside. No windows. One slab to rest on. A bucket. Absolute dark. The door slammed shut. The lock closed with a heavy metallic clack. One of the guards paused. Good luck getting out of this one, Split Blood. A smirk in his voice. Dawns when they execute traitors. Footsteps receded. Silence. In the dark, Uzaya sat unmoving. He was alone, but the pendant's weight was constant. He felt the presence of the fleshy eye. Castle believed the problem was buried. Uzaya closed his eyes and slowed his breathing. To listen, he let the noise fall away. Chapter 27. The Convergence. Part 1. The Herald. Orlin stood on the cliff, looking out over the water at the ancient arch embedded in the rock below. 10 Bricks Gate, dark and still against the restless sea. They call him a watcher. He inherited the job from his father. His grandfather had held it, his great-grandfather before that. 7 generations standing watch, tending the gate once commanded by something far greater than them. The watcher had never seen the gate show any sign of life, nor had anyone before him. The surface began to churn. Concentric rings formed, spun up, dissolved, then formed again. Before long, the arch held a spiral vortex of opaque patterns, swirling mist and shadowed shapes. The shimmer at the gate's heart thickened before Orlin's eyes, bulging outward as if something leaned against it from beyond. Then a figure stepped through. Orlin's breath caught. A surveyor. No one else could have crossed a forming gate and lived. He stood the height of 3 men. His body was massively built, all deliberate proportion and heavy muscle. His skin was near black, resolving to deep blue where light meets it, smooth and hairless, without seam or flaw. Dark robes hung from him in heavy folds, sleeveless and open at the chest, bound at the waist. Where eyes should have been, burned a fierce blue radiance. Not light reflected, but light contained. For a moment, the figure stood utterly still, the air around him charged with electricity. Then he turned his head toward Orlin, lingering for a heartbeat. Orlin tried to move. Couldn't. Time slowed around him. A crushing weight pressed down on him. He tried to run, but his legs were anchored in place. One hand strained toward his sword, inching forward with agonizing slowness. His breath came after he remembered to take it. The world dulled, distant, and muted, sealed off from him. The 2 guards were motionless. One stood with his mouth half open. The other held a crossbow half raised. Below them, the surveyor moved through the surf. He glided through the water toward the shore, black robes trailing, blue radiance gathered around its hands. When it reached the beachhead, it turned toward the gate and traced the outline of the arch in the air. Blue light followed the motion, hanging for a breath before fading. Then it moved along the beach, pausing at measured intervals before moving on again. At the farthest point, it halted and turned its head toward Eldenport, The dark sprawl of the city stretched along the coast beyond the cliffs. A faint blue current passed across the smooth plane of its face, tightening as if drawing something distant into alignment. It held there, motionless. At last it turned back to the gate. Within the arch, the air folded and began to spiral, reforming in slow, deliberate motion. The surveyor lifted its arms, palms open, as though offering itself to the space before it. It stepped forward. The shimmer closed around its form. For an instant, a blue current flared along the curve of the arch. Then it was gone. The wind stilled. Orlan dropped to one knee as the weight vanished all at once, movement returning as his breath came back in a ragged rush. His limbs shook, refusing him for a moment longer, as if they hadn't yet received the order to obey. What was that? One of the guards managed, bent forward, breathing hard. Orlan drew a small ink vial and quill from his coat and began to write. He folded the parchment, sealed it, and handed it to the guard. "Take this to the Crucible Vault," he said. "Alert the Elder Council. Now." The boat pushed off from the rocks below, oars biting into the water as it turned toward Eldenport. Orlan watched it shrink against the gray swell until it was no more than a moving shadow on the surface. He turned back to the gate. It stood still again. But the hum had not stopped. Part 2. Caer Thalor. The council chamber in Caer Thalor was built for comfort, not crisis. 12 counselors sat around a massive table of darkened elm, its surface worn smooth by centuries of debate. Their robes were cut from heavy cloth, dyed in deep crimsons, indigos, and forest greens. The hems worked with metallic thread that caught the light as they shifted. Rings gleamed on soft hands. Signet chains rested against embroidered collars. The markings they wore were not symbols of service, but of possession. They did not govern Tharn Eskar as a whole. Each spoke for a territory, a route, a ledger of obligations that extended beyond the chamber. Beneath that lay family interests and old promises. The counselors wore those claims the way a queen wears her jewelry. Counselor Vess was the exception. He held no territory and carried no ledger. He sat on this council and on Eldenport's Elder Council, appointed to each for his knowledge of the Veilguard. When questions of resonance arose, they called on him. When votes were cast, they did not. Servants moved silently between them, refilling wine goblets, placing platters of roasted quail and honeyed figs within easy reach. Incense burned in ornate braziers, masking the smell of sweat that had begun to linger in the room over the past week. No one spoke of it directly. The missing servants, the guards sent to outer posts who had not returned, the growing emptiness in the halls. Instead, the counselors ate, drank, and debated minor allocations, lingering over details that did not matter. The chamber remained immaculate. Beyond its walls, the city was coming apart. Counselor Baltus stood at the head of the table, reviewing reports without his usual composure. He had occupied that place long enough that the room normally bent around him. Today, his gray hair lay out of order. His silken robe, worth more than a common household earned in a year, was darkened with perspiration. The parchments before him multiplied as he read. Notices, reports, requests that did not stop coming. All bad news, with no answers. Counselor Mara sat 3 seats down, draped in violet silks, hands folded on the table's edge. Soft-spoken by habit, deadly by connection. Her family's web of alliances stretched from Caer Thalor to the coastal cities. Her plate held untouched pastries. She sipped wine from a silver chalice, saying little, but her eyes saw everything. Counselor Thrace filled his seat at the table, broad and red-faced. He was more interested in his roasted duck than the discussion. Thrace had come by his seat with coin, not lineage, and distrusted scholars on principle, especially those who forgot who paid them. At the far end of the table sat Counselor Vess, eldest of them by 2 decades, thin as parchment, white hair hanging past his shoulders. His face was lined with the marks of long hours spent squinting at ancient texts in poor light, but his eyes were bright, warm even. Many considered him the greatest historian in Tharn Eskar. His Histories of the Realms was widely read, prized by scholars and, more impressively, by the people across the realm. In outlying towns, a single copy might serve an entire village, but few at this table cared what his histories said. Item 1, Baltus said, tension edging his voice. Tenbrick's gate is active. The Watcher reports unusual activity. Thrace shifted his weight, chewing as he spoke. Define unusual. A figure emerged, did not engage, assessed the coastline around the gate, then returned through it. Silence. A scout, Vess said quietly from the far end. More likely, a surveyor. What's a surveyor? Mara asked, her soft voice strained with tension. Someone who prepares the way, Vess said slowly. The gates were only used for one thing. He set his hands flat on the table. And that's invasion. His words hung in the air. Baltus turned to the next parchment. He cleared his throat. Item 2, Eldenport. Multiple sinkholes reported. Frequent quakes. Some public concern. The markets are experiencing a downturn. Commerce has been affected. He paused. Additionally, there does seem to be undead of some sort, observed near the quagmire, even reported near the gates of Valros. Numbers vary. Harmless. Just standing there. A faint sigh escaped him, more weary than troubled. Nevertheless, the people are concerned. Thrace stopped eating. The undead are nothing new. Baltus nodded wearily, continuing to read. Many citizens have attempted to flee by sea, afraid to travel north. The docks are reaching capacity. Let them flee, Mara interjected, sipping her wine. Eldenport has always been unstable. It's built on swamp and ruin. Item 3, Baltus's voice dropped. The northern mountain gate. Everyone looked up. The gate stood only hours from where they sat. What about it? Thrace demanded. It's spinning. Vess stood slowly. Show me the report. He read, his weathered face going pale. When did this start? 2 days ago, Baltus said. A low vibration accompanies it. Vess looked around the table. You have to understand what this means. Tenbrick's gate is active. The mountain gate may be activating. These are part of the same ancient network. So? Mara asked, leaning back in her chair. So this is coordinated. Vess's voice rose. 3 gates. 3 points of entry. Caer Thalor, Eldenport, and wherever the third one is. You're speculating, Thrace said dismissively. Why 3? I'm reading history. Vess's hand came down on the report. There is another gate. We just don't know where. The gate network was built for instantaneous troop deployment across the realm, even into the sunless realm below. If multiple gates activate simultaneously, it can only mean one thing. Thrace scoffed, pushing his plate away. The Drow civilization has been dead for 3,000 years. Even if any still survive, They're not invading anything.
Then explain the gates, Vess said, managing a half-smile.
Natural reactivation. Ley line fluctuations. Thrace waved dismissively. We'll commission a study. There's no time for studies. Vess turned to Baltus. You must mobilize the Royal Guard. Summon the Arcane Legion. Baltus hesitated, looking around the table at the other counselors. Now is not the time for panic. By the time you act, Vess said, his voice hardening, they'll be through the gates. Counselor Vess, Baltus said carefully, exhaustion thinning his voice. We appreciate your historical perspective, but we must follow proper procedure. A vote will be called tomorrow to determine our response. Tomorrow? Vess stared. You felt the tremor last night. Everyone in this city felt it. And you want to wait until tomorrow? We will respond appropriately, Baltus repeated. His hands trembled slightly as he gathered his papers. Vess looked around the table. Mara sipped her wine. Thrace picked at his duck. No one met his eyes. Then I'm done here, Vess said quietly. He gathered his notes and walked to the door. Counselor Vess, Baltus called after him. Where are you going? To the archives, to learn what's coming. He paused at the threshold. Since no one here is, the door closed behind him. The council sat in silence. Finally, Thrace spoke. He's always been dramatic. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Baltus moved to the next item on the agenda and began to read. Later, deep in the archives of Caer Thalor, the council's arguments felt far away. Candlelight marked points between towering shelves, dust drifting through the still air. Stone and age pressed in from all sides. This was a place built to preserve what others forgot. Vess pulled ancient texts from their shelves, brittle parchments depicting the gate networks of Tharn Eskar, theorizing likely locations for Veilguard infrastructure after the Sundering. He spread them across the table and studied each by candlelight. 3 gates were marked on the ancient schematics. Vess traced them in sequence, aligning old ink with the new reports. Tenbrick's Gate lay along the southwestern coast, active. The northern mountain gate near Caer Thalor, showing signs of activation. The shattered one was marked near Holford in the north. Together, their positions formed a triangle across Tharn Eskar. Part 3. At the Gates of Valros. Captain Sarek stood on the wall as dawn broke over the quagmire. Another watch had ended without relief. He had been there for 3 days, barely slept. The horde had been gathering since the tremors began. Now hundreds of them stood scattered in the mist along the frontier, swaying, twitching. Some didn't move at all. Behind the horde, deeper in the fog, larger shapes moved. Sarek raised the spyglass, narrowing his view until motion separated from mist. A spindled silhouette breaking the haze as Sarek held the glass steady. Too many limbs showed before the rest of it was visible. 8 legs, a shell-plated body the size of a mule, twitching tendrils where a face should have been, probing the air. Sarek knew it then. A crawler. Burrowing things, meant for the deep, rarely seen on the surface and never in daylight. Commander Torvin stepped up beside him on the rampart. He was thick through the chest, a hand shorter than Sarek, beard iron gray and cut close, dark curls brushing his shoulders. His armor was serviceable plate, the city's crest nearly polished smooth. Straps had been replaced with mismatched leather. He settled his weight into the parapet and let the stone hold him. He didn't ask what Sarek was seeing. He looked for himself. Still growing, I see, Torvin concluded after a moment. Sarek nodded. more every hour. Then the ground shook. A crack, audible even from the walls. Sarek held the spyglass steady as the swamp floor sagged, mud sliding downward, water pulling inward with it. The edges were all he could make out as the ground gave way. The sinkholes were multiplying. At the edge of the hole, something pale took shape. Through the glass, Sarek caught flashes of gray-white hide, uneven, hunched, and muscular. When the blur resolved, eyes bulged from its shoulders and neck, dozens packed into waxy flesh where muscle should have been, slick and unblinking. The face drifted in and out of clarity, shallow and unfinished. Nothing there but the clustered eyes. It crouched at the sinkhole's edge. "What is that?" a guard whispered. "Pale horror," Sarek said. "Creatures that open the earth." He kept the spyglass trained on it. They appear in the records during the siege of Grim Hollow, 3 centuries ago. Another crack. A second one, less than 200 yards from the first. "They're making the sinkholes?" someone asked. Then the gas came. Yellow-green vapor seeped from the fresh holes and settled into the low ground, pooling instead of drifting. It only deepened, spreading outward until the horde beneath it vanished from sight. The stench followed moments later. Sulfur, rot, and something else that burned the back of Sarek's throat even from the wall. Along the lower works, men shouted and pulled cloth over their faces as the fog expanded. Sarek watched the garrisons at ground level in front of the gates. One man staggered back from the mist, another dropped where he stood. A third tried to haul in clear and failed. The gas kept coming, swallowing boots, knees, then torsos. A soldier fell hard. No screen, no warning. Convulsions took him, foam at his mouth, his skin already graying as the others dragged him clear. "Get the healer!" someone shouted from below. Sarek lowered the glass. He already knew. Dead before they reached the steps. Toxic vapor bled up from the fresh sinkholes and spread across the gate yard at the edge of the quagmire. Grass blackened where it touched. Water filmed over and darkened. Along the base of the walls, the gas pooled, forcing the last of the troops to retreat. Within the choking shroud, the horde stood untouched. "Look," Sarek said, pointing with the spyglass. More shapes emerged from the pit. Inhuman, unnatural, clawed. They joined the horde. "We can't reach them through that," Sarek said, pointing over the toxic fog. "They don't need us to," said Torvin, eyes fixed on the horizon. "They're changing the terrain. When they're done..." He didn't finish. Everyone knew the walls wouldn't matter anymore. In the plaza, the Valric twins stood silent. "Why aren't they waking?" a sentry asked, voice thin. "The horde's right there." "They will," another said. Not certain. Hopeful. From his position on the wall, Torvin kept looking back to the stone guardians standing below, scanning for any sign of movement. Nothing. A messenger pushed through to Sarek's shoulder. Runner came back from the ordained compound. Sarek kept his eyes on the fog. And? No one's there. Guards said they heard horses before dawn. Along the wall, men shifted their weight and checked their strings again. Sarek said nothing. He lifted the glass and looked north into the gas thickening over the lower ground, at the shapes moving within it. Torvin turned to his officer, his weathered face grim. "Message the Elder Council and Caer Thalor. Tell them it's time. We must have reinforcements." Sarek and Torvin remained on the wall, the horde massed on the horizon. Neither spoke. The Valric twins, inert.
The gates of Valros looked smaller beside the horde, and 600 men to hold it. Part 4. The Pirate's Prophet. The docks reeked of desperation, salty air thick with the stink of bodies pressed together. The eastward docks were choked with hundreds of souls, merchants clutching lockboxes, mothers dragging their children, nobles barking orders at their servants. Desperation thickened the press. Fear rode it. Travel north was impossible. Beyond the gates of Valros waited the horde. The only escape was by sea, and there weren't enough boats. Fleet Master Roderick Vane stood on the deck of his flagship, the Iron Kraken, watching the crowd surge and break against the docks like a living tide. He was tall, spare to the bone, his face split by an old scar no one asked about twice. A black mustache and close beard framed a mouth that rarely bothered to smile. 5 hand-picked captains stood behind him, silent. He had earned their attention. This was too large a harvest for one knife. "I'll set the price," Vane said. 500 gold per head. No negotiation. One captain shifted, his left sleeve pinned neatly at the elbow. 500? Vane didn't look at him. "They'll pay, or they'll drown. Either way, we sail full." The captains dispersed. Those with money pressed forward. Merchants hauling ledges, nobles clutching jewelry boxes, traders gripping deeds and promissory notes. Coin decided position. City guards had tried to impose order, but the effort collapsed almost immediately. The crowd was too large, too frantic, too aware that every wasted moment narrowed their chances to escape. Those without coin were pushed back. No gold, no passage. Only the slow, crushing understanding that the ships would sail without them. A merchant stepped forward, middle-aged, soft hands, silk robes stained and torn. He offered everything he had: bolts of silk, crates of spices, exotic goods worth a small fortune. His servants were already unloading them at his feet. Vane's appraiser, a thin man with wire-framed spectacles, scanned the manifest. 300, maybe. "But my family." The merchant gestured behind him. His wife, 2 children. The youngest clutched a cloth doll, no more than 6. "There are 4 of us." "Then you're 1 short," Vane said. No malice, just arithmetic. "Choose." The merchant swallowed and looked up at him. "Please." Vane looked past him at the line stretching down the dock. Hundreds more pressed forward. Time was money. Money was passage. Passage was survival. "Hurry up, or lose your place," he said. The merchant bent, pulled his children close. Whispered words meant only for them. Then he stepped back. "Take them." The youngest turned. "Papa?" "Go with your mother." She was pulled aboard. His wife followed, without looking back. The merchant stood alone as the crowd closed around him. "Next," Vane said. By midday, the pirate vessels were overloaded. Holds brimmed with gold, jewelry, and portable fortunes of every kind. Passengers were crammed below decks into spaces meant for cargo. The ship sat low in the water, heavy enough to make even seasoned sailors uneasy. Vane stood on the Iron Kraken's deck as they pushed off, watching the crowds still packed along the docks. His first mate approached, ledger in hand. "Best haul we've had in years, Captain." "Mark the harbor," Vane said. "We'll return once it settles." "If there's anything left," said the first mate. Vane smiled. Not cruel, just practical. There's always something left. The fleet split as it cleared the harbor. 3 ships turned north toward Brinehand Cove. Lawless, pirate territory. The others bore south, carrying those who had paid enough to choose their destination. The docks remained crowded long after the sails vanished. The merchant who had bought passage for his family stood at the edge of the dock, watching the ships vanish into the coastal mist. At his feet lay his daughter's cloth doll, dropped and forgotten. He stared at it for a long time, but he didn't pick it up. When the tremor came, the dock shuddered. A woman screamed. There was splashing as people went into the water. The merchant did not turn. The ships were already beyond sight.